Welcome back to English Through Stories. I'm Eliel.
And I'm Maya. And I need to start today's episode with something that I think is one of the most uncomfortable feelings a language learner can have. And I want to describe it very specifically because I think if you felt it, you'll recognize it immediately.
Go ahead.
It's the feeling of trying to be kind. Genuinely, sincerely, warmly trying to make someone feel better. And the words come out, words you believe are kind, words that feel like a hand extended toward another person. And instead of making things better, they make things worse. And the other person's expression changes, and you can see it happening, and you can't stop it, and you don't understand why.
Because from the inside, you were being generous.
You were being generous and caring and present. You saw someone struggling and you reached toward them, and somehow, the reaching itself was the problem. And you stand there holding the kindness you meant to give, and you have no idea where it went wrong.
Today's story is about exactly that feeling.
Today's story is about a woman named Beatriz. And Beatriz is, I want to say this clearly, she is one of the most genuinely warm people in this story. She sees her colleague in distress, and she moves toward her immediately. She doesn't look away. She doesn't pretend not to notice. She does the thing that in her culture, in her language, in everything she has ever been taught about kindness, she does the right thing.
And the English language, in one very specific, very invisible way, turned that right thing into something else entirely.
And her colleague pulled away from her. And for days, Beatrice didn't know why.
This one stayed with me for a while after I heard it. I think it will stay with our listeners too.
Narrator, please.
Her name was Beatriz Cavalcanti. 32 years old, originally from Belo Horizonte, Brazil, and for the past 11 months, an administrative coordinator at a mid-size healthcare clinic in Toronto called Meridian Health Partners. Meridian was the kind of workplace that is easier to describe by its atmosphere than its structure. It was busy without being chaotic, professional without being cold, and populated by the particular kind of people who choose healthcare-adjacent work. People who, generally speaking, notice when other people are not okay. This suited Beatrice. She was, at her core, a noticer. She had always been someone who registered the emotional temperature of a room the moment she entered it, who felt when something was off, when someone needed something, when the air had changed. In Portuguese, she was effortlessly warm. She knew how to say the right thing at the right moment with the right weight. She knew how to sit with someone in a difficult moment and make them feel less alone in it simply through the quality of her attention. These were not learned skills for Beatrice. They were native. In English, she was careful. Her grammar was solid. She had studied it seriously before moving and had spent 11 months refining it daily. She communicated clearly in meetings, wrote professional emails that her manager had once described as very thoughtful, and could navigate almost any workplace situation with confidence. She was proud of how far she had come. She was also aware, in the honest and private way of anyone who lives in a second language, that there were textures she was still developing, dimensions of English that lived beneath the grammar and vocabulary, in the feeling of words, in what they carried, in what they did to people. She did not yet know the full geography of this invisible territory. She was about to learn one part of it. The Tuesday it happened was a difficult one for the whole office. A staffing system that the clinic had been transitioning to for 3 months had experienced what the IT email described as an unexpected migration issue, which meant in practice that approximately 400 patient appointment records had not transferred correctly and needed to be manually verified before the end of the business day. This was not a small task. It was a large, time-sensitive, anxiety-producing task, and it fell primarily on the administrative team, which meant it fell primarily on Beatrice and her closest colleague at Meridian, a woman named Jo. Jo McKenzie was 36, Scottish by origin, and Torontonian by about 8 years, and she was, on most days, the most competent person in any room she occupied. She had the kind of organized mind that turned chaos into spreadsheets without visible effort. And she was the person others came to when they needed to know where something was, or who was responsible for something, or what the actual protocol was versus what people thought the protocol was. On this particular Tuesday, Joe was not okay. Beatriz noticed that the moment she came back from her lunch break. Joe was at her desk. That part was normal, but her posture was different, tighter, shoulders slightly raised. Her eyes were moving between two screens in a rapid, slightly frantic pattern. There was a coffee cup beside her keyboard that had clearly been there for a while, the kind of coffee that stops being comfort and starts being fuel. And there was a quality to her stillness that Beatriz recognized immediately as the stillness of someone who was working very hard to keep something contained. Beatriz set her bag down at her own desk. She looked at Joe for a moment. Joe didn't look up. Beatriz thought, she is overwhelmed. She is in that place where the work is pressing down and the time is pressing in, and there is too much to hold at once. In this situation, in Portuguese, Beatriz would have known exactly what to say. She would have known how to step close, how to soften her voice, how to offer the particular combination of presence and permission that says, I see you, and it is okay to be where you are right now. She reached for the English equivalent. She walked a few steps to Joe's desk. She placed her hand briefly and gently on the edge of the desk, just near her, and she said in her warmest voice, with the full sincerity of someone who genuinely wanted to ease another person's burden, Joe, calm down. It will be okay. She meant, breathe. Come back into your body for a moment. You are not alone in this. The thing will be done and it will be fine. Joe looked up from her screens. Something moved across her face, fast, controlled, but visible if you were watching, and Beatriz was watching. It was not the softening Beatriz had hoped for. It was a different movement entirely, a kind of tightening, a brief flash of something that might have been hurt or might have been something more like anger quickly folded back in. I'm fine, Beatriz, thank you. The thank you was the period at the end of a sentence that meant, please stop talking. Beatriz walked back to her desk. She sat down, she opened her own workload and began working through the patient record she was responsible for. But a portion of her attention stayed on what had just happened, turning it, examining it, looking for the place where she had gone wrong. She had been kind. She had been sincere. She had moved toward Joe rather than away, which is always the right instinct. She had used a gentle voice. She had not been dismissive or dramatic. She could not find the error. The afternoon passed. Joe worked steadily and silently. Beatriz worked steadily and silently. The 400 records were verified, all of them, by both of them, by 4:45. Their manager, a man named Patrick, sent an email to the team that said, outstanding work today. Seriously, everyone. Joe closed her screens and collected her things with the quiet efficiency of someone who's still slightly inside their own head. She said goodbye to the room in general, not to Beatriz specifically, which was unusual. Beatriz said goodbye. She drove home and made dinner and thought about the tightening she had seen on Joe's face. The next morning, Joe was warmer. Not completely back to normal, but warmer. The day after that, more so. But something had been slightly rearranged between them, and she could feel it, the way you feel a slight shift in the way a door hangs, barely there, but present. 2 weeks later, she found her answer. She found it, of all places, at a birthday lunch for a colleague named Reza. 8 of them went to an Italian restaurant a block from the office, and during dessert, somehow, the way conversation at these lunches somehow always finds the topics it was always going to find, they ended up talking about language, about words that don't translate, about things you say in one language that don't exist in another.
Beatriz told the table about a word in Portuguese, saudade, that means a longing for something or someone you love that is absent, with the particular quality of that longing being both sad and warm at the same time. The table appreciated this. Reza said there was a Persian equivalent. Joe said she had a Scottish grandmother who had a word in Gaelic for the particular homesickness you feel for a place you've never actually been. And then Beatriz, because the conversation had opened the door, said, "Can I ask something?" There was a moment a few weeks ago in the office. I said something to someone and I think it did not land well. I have been trying to understand." The table was quiet in the attentive way of people who are genuinely interested. She described the Tuesday, the records, Joe at her desk, the words she had chosen. "Calm down. It will be okay." There was a brief pause. And then Joe, who was sitting 2 seats away across the table, made a sound, a small, involuntary sound that was equal parts recognition and something softer than that. She looked at Beatrice. "That was you," she said, "on the Tuesday." "Yes," Beatrice said. "I wanted to help. I didn't know what I did wrong." Joe was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It's not your fault. It's just, 'calm down' is a phrase that it hits differently than I think you intended it to. In English, at least here, when someone tells you to calm down when you're stressed, it doesn't really feel like comfort. It kind of feels like they're saying you're overreacting, like your reaction is the problem." Beatrice looked at her. "But I didn't think your reaction was wrong," she said. "I thought the situation was hard." I know that now. But in the moment, the phrase made me feel like I was being told to contain myself, like I was being managed, like the problem wasn't the 400 records, the problem was that I was visibly struggling with them." Beatrice was quiet. "In Portuguese," she said slowly, "the equivalent, it means something much gentler. It means, 'Come back to yourself. You are okay. I am here.'" "That's lovely," Joe said, and she meant it. In English, though, "calm down" carries a different weight. It's one of those phrases that sounds helpful but lands as criticism, even when the person saying it has the kindest heart in the room. Beatrice looked at the tablecloth for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean it the way it landed." "I know," Joe said. "I think I knew even then, after a few seconds. I just needed a moment." They looked at each other across the tiramisu and the birthday candles that had already been blown out, and something that had been slightly rearranged between them quietly rearranged itself back. "Tell me how you would say it in English, the gentle version." "Oh," and she thought about it genuinely for a few seconds. "I'd probably say, 'Hey, are you doing okay?' Or just, 'That's a lot. You've got this.' Or even just sit near someone and not say anything." "The sitting," Beatrice said, "that I know how to do." "You do," Joe said. "You're actually very good at it." They finished dessert. They walked back to the office together, and somewhere between the restaurant and the front door, the 2 weeks of slight rearrangement fully resolved, and the door hung straight again, and they were, once more, exactly as they had been. Music softens and holds warmly, then fades.
That lunch, that conversation over tiramisu.
Yeah.
And the thing that gets me the most, the kindest heart in the room. Joe knew. She knew Beatrice was trying to be kind, and it still hurt in the moment.
Which is the specific cruelty of this kind of mistake. It's not that the other person doesn't know your intention eventually. It's that intention doesn't arrive immediately. What arrives first is the phrase, and the phrase lands before you can explain what you meant by it.
Okay, I want to make sure everyone listening understands exactly what happened. Because when I first heard the story, I have to be honest, my first reaction was, really? Calm down is offensive? That feels so mild.
And that's actually the most important thing to say first, because if you come from a language or a culture where the equivalent of calm down is warm and soothing, which many people do, your reaction will be exactly that. Really? This small phrase? This is the problem? And I want to validate that reaction completely before I explain why the phrase lands the way it does.
Please.
In many languages, and specifically in Brazilian Portuguese, in Spanish, in Arabic, in many Asian languages, there is a phrase that translates roughly to calm down, or tranquil yourself, or be calm, that functions as a gesture of comfort. It's something you say to someone who is distressed, the way you might put a hand on their shoulder. It means, I see that you are overwhelmed. I am here. The situation is manageable. You don't have to carry this alone. It is one of the most affectionate things you can say to someone in those languages and those cultural contexts.
So Beatrice wasn't reaching for a phrase from a textbook. She was reaching for the most natural expression of care she had.
The most natural, the most instinctive, the most sincere. And in English, specifically in North American English and in British English too, calm down does not carry that meaning. It carries essentially the opposite.
Why? Because I really want to understand the why. What is it about those two words in English that makes them land as criticism rather than comfort?
It comes down to what the phrase implies about the person it's directed at. When you tell someone to calm down in English, the implicit message, the thing that lives underneath the words, is your current emotional state is inappropriate. You are too much right now. Your reaction is disproportionate. You need to regulate yourself.
Yeah, I feel it now that you say it like that.
And the reason it carries that implication is cultural. In many English-speaking professional and personal contexts, particularly in North American culture, there is a strong, often unspoken value placed on emotional self-regulation, on being composed, on not letting feelings spill over into the visible space. It's not that emotions aren't felt, they are, but the expectation, in many contexts, is that you manage them internally. You don't show the overflow. So when someone is visibly stressed, visibly overwhelmed, and another person says, calm down, what they're essentially saying is, your overflow is visible and it shouldn't be, even if they mean it kindly, even if their tone is warm. The phrase itself carries that judgment, and it's the phrase the other person receives, not the intention.
And Jo said something really precise. She said it felt like being managed, like the problem was her reaction and not the situation.
Which is exactly right. And this is one of the most important things to understand about calm down in English. It redirects focus. When Jo was overwhelmed by the 400 records and a time pressure and a malfunctioning system, her attention was on the problem. And then Beatrice said, calm down, and suddenly Jo's attention was redirected to herself, to her own emotional state, to the question, am I overreacting? Am I being too much? And when you're already overwhelmed, being asked to question your own reaction is not soothing. It's an extra burden.
So instead of lightening the load, it added to it.
Exactly. It added to it in a very specific, very uncomfortable way.
Okay, so we know the phrase is the problem. We understand why. Now, what should Beatrice have said? Because this is where I think our listeners really need the practical help. The situation was real. Jo was clearly struggling. Something needed to be said or done. What are the actual, usable alternatives?
Great. Let's go through them properly because there are a few different approaches and the right one depends on what you're trying to do. The first approach is what I'd call the acknowledging question, and Jo actually gave us a perfect example in the story. Hey, are you doing okay? This is so powerful because it does something calm down doesn't do. It puts the focus on Jo, not on her emotional state. It says, I see you, and I'm asking if you are okay, which means you're allowed to not be okay. It opens a door rather than closing one. And it invites Jo to say, actually, no, I'm not, or to say, I'm fine, just a lot going on, without either of those answers being wrong.
And the hey at the beginning, that matters, doesn't it? It softens it. It makes it feel human rather than clinical.
Hey is doing a lot of work in that sentence. It's informal, it's warm. It signals, this is not a professional observation, this is a personal one. I'm speaking to you as a person right now, not as a colleague. That shift from colleague to person is exactly what Beatrice was trying to create. She just needed the right phrase to create it with.
Okay, the second approach.
The second approach is what Jo also offered. That's a lot. You've got this. And I want to spend a moment on this one because I think it's beautiful and I think it's underused. That's a lot is one of the most validating things you can say to someone in English because it does something very specific. It acknowledges the size of what they're dealing with.
not their reaction to it, the thing itself. So when Joe was overwhelmed by 400 records and a time pressure and a malfunctioning system, "That's a lot" says, "Yes, this is genuinely a large thing you are carrying. I can see that." And your response to it, the tightness in your shoulders, the frantic eye movement between screens, that makes complete sense.
Given the actual size of what's in front of you.
You're validating the situation, not managing the person.
Exactly. You're not telling them how to feel or how to behave. You're confirming that their experience of the situation is appropriate. And from that foundation, from "this is genuinely hard," the second part, "you've got this," which is not toxic positivity. It's not saying there's no problem. It's saying I believe in your capacity to handle what's in front of you. Two very different things.
That's a lot. You've got this. I want everyone to write that down. That is such a practical, usable, genuinely kind thing to say.
And it works in almost any situation where someone is overwhelmed. The exam season, the work deadline, the difficult family thing, the day where everything arrived at once. That's a lot. You've got this. It's short, it's warm, it validates and it encourages without managing or minimizing.
What's the third approach?
The third one is slightly different. It's the offer of presence rather than words. Something like, "Do you need anything right now?" Or, "I'm right here if you need a hand." Or even simpler, "I've got time. Just say the word." These phrases are powerful because they put the control in the other person's hands. Instead of telling them what to feel or what to do, you're making yourself available and letting them choose. Which means if Joe wants to keep working alone, she can. If she wants to vent for 2 minutes, she can. If she wants Beatriz to take 20 of the 400 records, she can ask for that. The choice is hers. And giving someone that choice, especially when they're overwhelmed, is one of the most respectful things you can do.
Because part of what's exhausting about being overwhelmed is feeling like you've lost control of something.
Exactly. And an offer of presence that restores their agency, "I'm here if you need me," gives back a little bit of that control rather than taking more of it.
And then there's the last thing Joe mentioned, just sit near someone and not say anything, which is, honestly, maybe the most advanced option of all.
It really is, and it's something that's deeply understood in many cultures, but sometimes feels counterintuitive in a fast verbal environment. The act of being near someone without performing comfort, without producing words that demonstrate your kindness, is actually one of the most generous things you can offer. Because it says, "I don't need anything from you right now. I'm not here so that you can make me feel better about your situation. I'm just here."
Which Beatriz is good at. Joe said it directly. You're very good at it.
And I think that line is worth holding because Beatriz's instinct was right. She noticed, she moved toward, she stayed. All of that was correct. The only place where the English language got in the way was in the specific phrase she chose to accompany all of that good instinct.
One phrase, carrying the wrong weight.
One phrase, and it's a phrase that is genuinely difficult to know about before someone tells you. Because from the inside, if you come from a language where it means comfort, you have no reason to suspect it means something different in English. It doesn't sound harsh. It doesn't sound aggressive. It sounds exactly like what you meant, until you understand what it carries for the person hearing it.
Okay, I want to talk about the broader category here, because calm down is one phrase, but I think there's a whole family of English phrases that have this same problem, where the intention is kind, but the landing is unexpectedly harsh.
Yes, and this is really worth knowing because once you learn to recognize the pattern, you get much better at spotting the others. The pattern is phrases that, in trying to help, accidentally judge the other person's emotional state or imply their reaction is the problem rather than the situation. Calm down is the most famous one, but the family is larger. Relax, said to someone who is tense, has exactly the same problem. It implies your tension is inappropriate. Don't be so dramatic, which some people mean this situation isn't worth so much distress, lands as your distress is an exaggeration. Even you're overthinking it, which is often said with genuine care, meaning I don't want you to suffer unnecessarily, can land as your thinking process is the problem.
All of these redirect the problem from the situation to the person.
All of them. And they all share the same quality. They implicitly evaluate the other person's emotional response. And when someone is distressed, having their emotional response evaluated, even gently, is almost never comforting.
So the rule of thumb is, when someone is overwhelmed or upset, stay focused on the situation rather than the emotion.
Yes, that's a really clean way to put it. Don't comment on how they're feeling, acknowledge what they're dealing with. That's a lot stays with the situation. Calm down goes to the emotion. And that difference, that small pivot of attention, changes everything about how the words land.
Let me ask you one more thing, because I think it's culturally important. Beatriz mentioned that in Portuguese, the equivalent of calm down is warm. We've established that in English it isn't. But is this consistent across all English-speaking cultures? Is there a context where calm down does work?
That's a nuanced question. There are situations, very specific situations, where something like calm down can work in English, primarily in very close, very established personal relationships where the permission to say it has already been granted. If you and your best friend have an explicit understanding, a long history, a shared shorthand, and your friend says, "I'm spiraling, tell me I'm spiraling," then, "Okay, calm down," said with warmth and humor, can be exactly the right thing, because the relationship has already established that the phrase is being used affectionately. But this requires two things that Beatrice and Joe didn't have: a very close personal relationship and an established permission to use that register. In a workplace, in a professional context, with a colleague you like but don't know deeply, calm down almost never lands well regardless of your intention.
So the closer the relationship, the more latitude the phrase has.
And even then, it's still one of those phrases to use with care. Because even in close friendships, if the other person is genuinely distressed rather than just momentarily scattered, calm down can still feel dismissive. The safest instinct is almost always, when someone is struggling, focus on the situation rather than the state.
Let's bring everything together cleanly.
3 things. First, calm down in English, especially in professional and semi-personal context, carries an implicit message that the other person's emotional reaction is inappropriate, even when said with complete warmth, even when it comes from the kindest possible place. The phrase redirects attention from the situation to the person and implies evaluation of their emotional state. Second, the alternatives. When someone is overwhelmed, try, "Are you okay?" Or, "Hey, are you doing all right?" Or, "That's a lot, you've got this." Or, "I'm here if you need anything." Or, "Just say the word," which restores their agency and makes you available without requiring anything of them. And third, the broader pattern. Watch out for phrases that, in trying to help, comment on the other person's emotional state rather than the situation they're in. Relax, don't be dramatic, you're overthinking it. All of these have the same structure. They evaluate rather than validate. When in doubt, stay with the situation. "That's a lot" is almost always better than anything that begins with "you're being."
And I want to add from this story specifically, the sitting, the just being near someone, in any language, in any culture. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when someone is struggling is simply not leave.
And Beatrice knew how to do that all along.
She did. The language let her down. She didn't let Joe down.
She didn't. In a warm, comfortable beat of silence.
Okay, we are at our favorite moment of every episode.
The comments.
The comments. And this week, I think this episode is going to produce some really honest responses, because today's topic is one that I think touches a specific kind of pain that language learners don't always get to talk about. Not the dramatic mistake, not the funny mistake, but the quiet one. The one where you were trying to be good to someone and it still went wrong.
So here's what we want to hear. Have you ever tried to comfort someone in English or been kind to someone and had it land differently than you meant? Have you ever used a phrase that felt warm to you, maybe translated from your first language, and seen it cause confusion or distance?
What happened? And how did you find out? Did someone tell you, like Joe told Beatrice on birthday tiramisu? Did you read something? Did you figure it out yourself later and feel that specific quiet dread of, oh, that's what that was?
And if you did fix it, how? Did you have the conversation? Did you explain? Did you find a way to repair it?
We want to hear it. All of it. The messy middle and the good ending, and even the stories that don't have a good ending yet. Because I promise you, someone reading your comment right now is standing in the middle of their own version of Beatrice's 2 weeks. The slightly rearranged door, the feeling they can't name. And your story might be the thing that helps them find the words.
Leave it in the comments. We read them all. In this community, the people who show up here, who trust us with the real stories, they are the best part of what we do.
The absolute best part.
And to Beatrice, wherever you are, you moved towards someone when it would have been easier to look away. The phrase was wrong. The instinct was right. Those two things can be true at the same time. And now you have the phrase.
Now she has the phrase.
Go be kind. With the right words this time.
See you in the next story.